Let's make a tier list. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brad, otherwise known as Bradsphere, and today we're making a Pocket Meta tier list for Pokemon TCG Pocket. And it's going to be based on the current data that we have for Mythical Island. New set just around the corner, about a month away at time of recording. Very excited for that. Going to be a new, massive, full-fledged set of 200 plus cards. For now, though, the meta's in a really good place. I think it's one of the most diverse metas we've had. Feels like you could probably play anything and do well on ladder. Tournaments are a little bit different. Pilot skill does come into consideration for the most part when it comes to tournaments, and of course deck strength, but ladder, you can get away with stuff. Let's go through what we are ranking today. So we're ranking off of a few different things. Vibes. It's going to be a little subjective. Gonna get that out of the way. Yes, we're going to use actual empirical data, as you can see on the right hand side of your screen, but vibes will always be a portion of it. So that way, if anyone comes in saying, I think it should be this, this, and that, cool. I have data combined with my own slight biases to help skew what I have to say. Don't come at me for that. But first and foremost, of course, the number one thing we're going to be looking at is numbers. Win percentage, representation in the meta, how many decks are there, how often is a win, how many top finishes, things like that. And then the other thing is going to be just, is it okay on ladder? It's not going to be as incredibly weighted of a consideration when it comes to where things rank as something like tournament showings. But hey, ladder's still important. Ladder's still a part of the game. You got to keep that in mind. Tiers. S tier means it is the top deck in the format. I'd have like a tier 0 spot. I'm not going to put on this one because I don't think there is a tier 0 deck. A tier 0 deck, for those who are unfamiliar, because typically you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is referred to as like rogue and stuff like that in a lot of TCGs. Tier 0 means there is just a boogeyman in the format. It's just dominating in just a ridiculous fashion. We don't have that right now. What we do have are what I would think 3 very, very good decks at the top of the metagame that are playing this rock, paper, scissors type of game, while everyone else is just trying to either angle shoot those decks or, just try to do its own thing. So those would be an S tier. A tier, still very good decks. If you go to a tournament with it, you're very likely to do very well. Wouldn't be shocked if you won the whole thing with an A tier deck, but pilot skill comes into a bit more of play here, and these decks typically have decent matchups against at least 2 out of the 3 top decks. That's why you usually try to go after them, but the rest of the field, they're more close to 50-50, so that one you're trying to angle shoot like I said earlier, the top decks. B tier, these are just above average decks. Solid, okay, good. Gonna have some decent finishes in tournaments, gonna do well on ladder. Really comes down to pilot skill though. You're better off picking this deck if you're very, very, very well familiarized with it and you're really confident in your abilities with the deck, because you are at a slight disadvantage against everything else on the field. C tier, average decks, just okay. Really, more than anything, pilot skill trumps all, and you are at a severe disadvantage compared to the field in comparison to deck strength. D tier, don't recommend playing these. Fun cards, typically fun Pokemon, cool things to do, fun types of decks, but not particularly good. Would be severely shocked if we saw any of these finish in the top 10 finish in tournaments of larger scale tournaments, and of course if they won. Steel type. Take our boy Melmetal here. Point says. Take our boy Melmetal here, and he's a steel type. How often do you see steel type on ladder? Virtually never. I can count on one hand how many times I've seen steel type in games across the table from me, and that's since the entirety of the game's existence. So steel type is just going to be these MIA decks that you don't see a whole lot, don't really have enough concrete data on them to be like, well, they could be this, could be that. We don't know. They're just not prevalent enough. To be fair though, I would say Melmetal is a fairly strong card in its own right, but Golem just does the same thing in a better shell. So that's unfortunate. Anyway, Melmetal goes in here. Support types. So these are going to be cards like Marshadow, Superior. Where are we looking? Where's Greninja? Greninja, Weezing would be another one. There he is. Pretty much all these cards that are support cards that don't actually have a true build around. They're just going to be cards that you see. Oh, Druddigan, of course, is in here. And honestly, I'm going to even say Mew is in here as well. These are all cards that don't have true build around decks. Oh, Farfetch'd is the other one. And you see them in a lot of different decks helping support those archetypes. Marshadow supports most fighting archetypes, whether that's going to be all in on the Primate Mankey lines, or if it's going to be more so on the Aerodactyl stuff. Even things like Machamp and Golem can run Marshadow as well, but no deck is centered around Marshadow themselves. Superior, same thing. Venusaur, Celebi, pretty much any grass type you're going to see leverage in some way. Even the new Executor, you've seen some decks where it's just that and Superior, but there's no real just Superior deck. Greninja we see everywhere, from water types to anti-meta decks, things like that. Weezing is the obvious support card when it comes to dark types. Druddigan is just in everything right now because it's such a good wall. Mew is a bit controversial, I think, but I actually view it as a very good supporter card. It's in so many different decks right now. It doesn't have really its own deck. Anytime you see a deck on the right-hand side here, say Mew plus something, it's typically Mew plus other types of support cards, like Mew plus Greninja, for example, is a deck. We're doing Mew plus Pidgeot. But the deck is centered mostly around Pidgeot instead. So yeah, definitely I think a support card, a very good one at that. Probably the best one of the bunch, second to Druddigan and Greninja, but whatever. And Farfetch'd is just that one card that it can give consistent 40 damage that you throw into a deck. No one builds a Farfetch'd deck purely around it. And if you do build a deck purely around any of these, that's fine. Don't come at me in the comments saying, well, I actually have a Superior deck and it runs Farfetch'd, just the main. No. I'm talking about tournament displays, decks we see in the meta, things like that. Anyway, let's get through the list, starting with these two wonderful people, Florges and oh my god, I'm blanking on the name. Doesn't matter. These are bad cards. They are in Psychic aggro decks, specifically in ones that are like more budget oriented. They don't have a lot of access to like Mew and stuff like that. We've seen Mega Mogwai make a deck featuring Florges, and I think this one as well. Honestly, they're fine. They're fine for ladder, but overall, they're not very good. You could put them in C tier, but the deck representation for them over here in the metagame is so bad. Like, let me just show you Florges. I think it's at like a 35% win rate. All right, yeah, so Mew EX Florges, 38.67% win rate of 18 showings. Not very good. Florges Mew, 29%, 30%. Oh, that's the name of it. Beheeyem. Someone correct me in the comments for that one. Anyway, 30% win rate. So not very good. Yeah. Don't play them. But if you have nothing else to play and you want to play something on the ladder, yeah, for sure. Tournaments though, nah. Scolipede, B tier. Scolipede is a very well represented deck in the metagame. If we look over here towards the top, Scolipede Weezing is one of the top played decks. It's actually the 5th most played deck at 714 appearances in tournaments. 47.51% win rate isn't anything crazy, but I think that's in part to a few downsides when it comes to typing, because there's a lot of fighting type stuff going around, especially when it's sandwiched between the other two top decks in the meta, being Pikachu Zebstrika and Pikachu Raichu, both of which weak to fighting, both of which he has that in common with. So I think that's a big part of it. On top of that, I think it's actually kind of weak to Pikachu and stuff like that itself. Blaine, Pikachu, really fast, aggressive decks that can just kind of put the pedal down and really overrun it. The deck wants to set up with Weezing in the front line and kind of just protect, block, do Coca things, build up the Scolipede in the background, poison something, and then start one-shotting stuff. But if you're just too fast, it's hard to really overcome that. Overall, though, good deck. We've seen it win some tournaments even, but it's been a while since it's won anything, at least since like the first week of release. Celby. It's tough. You could make an argument that it's top of B tier. You can see Celby in Superior over here at 47.72% win rate with 1,000 appearances in the tournament. And then you see Executor down here at 53.74. The difference between these two lists and what they showcase is pretty much a lot of these Celby Superior lists are either going to be just Celby and Superior lines on their own, or they feature like a 1-1-1 split of Execute, an Executor EX, and then the new Executor. The ones down here that are shown as Executor EX first and then Celby are the ones that are listed with 2-2-2 type of things for Executor lineups, like 2 Execute, 2 of each Executor, or like 2-in-1 kind of thing, and then 2 Celby and your Superior and stuff like that. I think leaning a bit more into Executor is a bit better for Celby overall to allow it to just not get immediately destroyed in the front lane. That being said, though, I do think it is an A tier deck. I think it's the bottom of A tier. When the list is all said and done, it's going to be more so over here. It's leaning either way. The coin flips makes me want to put that back down to B, because when you have to play fairly and you don't have a Superior online, the coin flips can be not fun. But when you get Superior online and you have the ability to be flex into Executor for certain games, stuff like that, it makes the coin flips not really that big of a deal. When you're flipping 10 times, it kind of doesn't matter for the most part. Yeah, we've seen the screenshots of people getting really unlucky and flipping like 8 tails in a row. I posted one as well. But it happens. It's whatever. More often than not, it's not going to happen that way. So I think bottom of A tier, though I could see an argument for top of B tier. Next up, Aerodactyl. I actually think this is an A tier deck. Right now, Aerodactyl with Primeape is boasting an incredible 59.19% win percentage in the meta over the course of tournaments. That is crazy. And we go down, we see some other Aerodactyl lists, like Aerodactyl featuring Farfetch, which is leaning a bit more on the Marshadow type of stuff, with Farfetch, Marshadow, Hitmonlee. But while the other one that we saw, the Primeape, is just more so Aerodactyl, Primeape, and then maybe like a single Marshadow kind of thing. We've also seen some Machamp Aerodactyl lists do okay as well. It's just surprisingly a pretty good card. We mentioned Scolipede having a weak matchup against Fighting. Not only does it have a weak matchup against Fighting inherently, this card is a pain for it. You get Aerodactyl down and they can't evolve their Scolipede in the front line, or they can't evolve the Weezing in the front line. Especially if they try to do Koga things, it's hard to kind of reestablish that Weezing, unless they have another coughing in the background. So it does make their plays a bit awkward. Yes, you can kind of play around it by getting on the bench, but it really hoses that matchup overall. Good deck, very good, some wins, a lot of top finishes. Surprising that it's as good as it is. Articuno, I'm going to go ahead and just do this right now. Articuno, Starmie, and Vaporeon are going to be the top of B tier for me. I kind of put them all in the same realm. Yes, you can make an argument for them being low A tier, I think, because you do still have the access to the Misty flip shenanigans of the turn 1, OTK or an FTK. And I do think the ability to have all three of these cards work in tandem with the energy manipulation and being able to leverage Starmie's free retreat cost to be able to keep rotating out your Pokemon from your bench to your starting point and then flip around the energy with Vaporeon to just kind of cycle through over and over again is a very cool way to play the game and very interesting as well. That being said, though, it's just a above average solid deck, and there are better things to be doing when it comes to water type. Which we'll get to in a moment. I think it's very good, still very good. Starmie is one of the best cards in the game when it comes to just pure rate, but overall, these three cards kind of do the same thing for me, and that's why I have them in B tier. Dragonite is D tier. We don't need to talk about it, but I will real quick, because the next card is Gyarados in S tier. I'm going to go ahead and put Gyarados in S tier, specifically referring to Gyarados Greninja, but I want to talk about Gyarados alongside Dragonite, which I think is a little weird, as a reason as to why Dragonite's so bad. So Dragonite is bad because even if you get it online, right? Let's say, because it has access to Druddigon now. Druddigon is something that's played with Dragonite now, to be that frontline wall, which, by the way, Druddigon's in Gyarados as well. It's actually in a lot of things. But Druddigon is in there with Dragonite. Be able to be a wall, kind of help you build out the Dragonite. It's a stage 2. It needs 2 different energy types to get going. So it has a lot going against it, right? even when you get it going. Gyarados has what, 190, 180 HP, right? You need all 4 hits of that 200 damage you can do on Gyarados. And Gyarados is never the only Pokemon on the board when you're going against it. Usually has Greninja back there as well, even if it's just Froakie. Froakie has 60 HP. You need 2 hits from Dragonite onto the Froakie to get the kill, and then those other 2 hits if they hit Gyarados just bring it down to 80 HP, in which case Gyarados can return the favor by one-shotting the Dragonite. So even the damage output it has, due to its randomness, isn't enough against a lot of decks. Most stuff has more, like a lot of basics right now have more than 50 HP, right? So there's a lot of stuff that you have to do 2-shot with Dragonite to get rid of basics, and that's even before considering that their evolutions are down, because by the time you get Dragonite down, you probably have your opponent with a full board of all Pokemon. So Dragonite's pretty bad. On the flip side, Gyarados is insane. I think it's actually the best deck right now. Again, specifically the version with Greninja. Yes, there are versions with Articuno. There are versions with Starmie. There are versions with Vaporeon, right? And I think these are all fine in their own right. Look here, Gyarados, Greninja, 55.27% win rate, right? That's pretty solid. In fact, it's very solid. Starmie Gyarados, though, on the other hand, is down to a 48.79% win rate. Not as good. The Gyarados Druddigon is an interesting one. It's 51.9% win rate. And then, of course, Articuno, 50%. Overall, the one that's leading the pack and has the most play rate on top of that, with a 55% win rate with 1,400 appearances, that's a lot. That's really impressive. So I do think Gyarados Greninja is the best deck right now, because look how it pairs up against Mewtwo, for example. What I would argue is the other top deck, which is next tier anyway. The other S tier deck is Mewtwo. Mewtwo has 150 HP. Greninja hitting a Mewtwo plus the Gyarados is an instant knockout on the Mewtwo, right? On the flip side, Mewtwo cannot instantly knock out Gyarados. It only does 150 damage in comparison to Gyarados' health. Mew, the ultimate support card for Mewtwo now, has 130 HP, gets one-shot by Gyarados, and if it uses Gyarados' attack on it using genome hacking, it only does 140 to it. So he tanks that as well. Yeah, Gyarados just matches up so well against Mewtwo, in addition to it being a stage 1 where Mewtwo has to kind of get built up through Gardevoir and find a stage 2. Yes, you can argue the same thing for Greninja, but I think Gyarados, with the advantage of having Misty coin flips as a potential way to even accelerate further, is just an overall faster, slightly more consistent deck, even with Slab being added to the fold with Mewtwo. That being said, though, Mewtwo is still incredibly strong against pretty much everything else. And yeah, you look at this win percentage, be like, oh, 49.54% win rate, isn't that really crazy? Because look at the 2,600 player count with this. To post a 50% win rate with that high of a appearance is insane. If you gave another 1,200 counts to Gyarados, I do think it'd be closer to 50% in general, right? It just goes to show how, how good the deck performs even with lower ability players. Not everyone that enters these tournaments are going to be top players. A lot of them are going to be average or even below average. They just want to try and enter a tournament. All right, next we have a first C tier. It's Taurus. Taurus is basically going to be the anti-meta deck that runs Druddigon and Greninja. That's a really cool deck. I've played it. It's a lot of fun. But, it's not the greatest thing in the world. It just doesn't line up very well against the likes of like Mewtwo, for example, and Gyarados, some of the top decks. Even things like Articuno are kind of tough because it does the 120 against EX stuff. Yes, if you have Articuno in front of you and you have Greninja online, you can one-shot the Articuno in that sense. And of course, you can hit Celby in one-shot if you're running Giovanni, which you should be. So there are ways to kind of leverage this kind of thing. Plus, the Druddigon hits help bring down some of these Pokemon in general, but people are getting smarter about the Druddigon stuff and not mindlessly just attacking into it. They're allowing themselves to build up their own backline while you build up yours and try to leverage their pure raw power level against yours. Fun on ladder, solid on ladder. Tournaments, not doing as much. Alakazam. So I want to put it in B. I really do. But in reality, it is C tier. Probably below this, to be honest. I love Alakazam. If we go ahead and look for Alakazam, it is not good. Oh my goodness, 35.59% win rate. I had a lot of success with it in a recent video that I made. Another one down here is at 37% win rate as well. It's just not doing great in tournaments. Ladder, I think it's pretty solid. Similarly to Taurus, having the ability to actually pair up nicely against EX Pokemon, especially the likes of Celby and stuff like that, and Mewtwo as well, that want to have a lot of energy on them, at the cost of only losing 1 prize point on your end while gaining 2 potentially against them. Is very good. In practice, it's not working out as great as we'd like to see. I do think there is room for this to grow as an archetype. Numbers need to get tweaked and figured out. The slab, of course, for all psychic Pokemon have been a nice big upgrade to it, but overall, it's just doing I do think it's a lot better on ladder than tournaments, but we'll see how it goes. Executor. I think Executor is an A tier as well. It's hard to not put a lot of these cards into A tier when you're looking at the grass types because of the ability to just have a super potion on your side. Executor is super flexible, will help with the like of Superior. With the new Executor, just like the strengths we were giving to Alakazam, it gives those same strengths to the new Executor, and then have a super nice flexible option to balance with Celby. If I'm going to have Celby up here, I think this has to be up here as well. There's not a whole lot of decks that only run Executor and nothing else alongside of it as support. Most of them, we even just run one Celby, just as an extra backup plan. But overall, when you're leaning more towards the Executor, I actually think it's the better of the two, versus leaning into Celby. So I'm actually going to put it this way here. Golem. Incoming hot take. I think it's a B tier deck. Let's look at Golem real quick over here on the right. Golem has a 46.34% win rate at 466 appearances in tournaments. Here's my problem with Golem. I actually think Machamp is a better evolution line than Golem. The only positive Golem has going for it is the fact that it doesn't give away 2 prize points because it's not an EX. That doesn't mean I think Machamp's a better deck overall, by the way. I think performance-wise, I think Machamp is probably bottom of B tier. It could be top of C tier, but I think Machamp is actually slept on a little bit and has a bit of unexplored options. I think Machamp with Aerodactyl in particular is very, very strong. Being able to just guarantee that you draw your Machop every single game to start out, go watch my video, by the way, is very good. That being said, Golem, we're talking about this. Golem is not an A tier deck. It had a tournament win, hasn't had a lot since then. And the big problem is its lineup, similar to Machop, starts out strong, right? For the Machamp lineup, you go Machop, 1 energy, if you're going second, by the way, hit them, cool. Machoke, turn 2, energy again, 2 energy, hit him, awesome. And the Machamp, 3 energy, hit. It's just a nice, beautiful curve. The Golem line starts up similar. Geodude for 1, Graveler for 2, but then Golem has to throw a wrench and say, well, I need 4. Yes, you have Brock to be able to leverage that and use Golem on curve still, but I don't want to have to use a support card just to be able to play my stuff on curve. Yes, it's running Druddigon in the front line to help block and tank some hits, but that also changes your consistency of drawing your actual evolution line because you're running a bunch more basics, as well as Marshadow as well in there to kind of help balance this stage 2 line. Overall, it's fine. It's solid. It's a very powerful card once you get it online. I just think its consistency is the downside of it, and its backup plan isn't particularly amazing when it comes to the Marshadow stuff. But hey, that's just me. You might think it's an A tier deck. You could tell me in the comments down below why you think that is. But for now, I think it's B tier. Victory Bell, C tier. I think Victory Bell has gotten, and to put it, actually, where is it? Pidgeot. Pidgeot's the same kind of thing to me. They both got buffs from the new Flute card that came out with Mythical Island, both for different reasons. This card wants to have the backline filled up on the bench to be able to do more damage, so Flute helps in that sense. This one wants to keep rinsing and repeating the basic Pokemon it's able to one-shot by pulling it out with its ability and then bringing it back into the bench with Flute and doing it again. But for the same thing, they both kind of do similar ideas. This one's better because again, it has access to Erica and can pivot to things like Executor and maybe run a Celby, things like that. But overall, they're not doing too hot when it comes to just the meta share and what percentage they're doing things with. So let's look at Victory Bell real quick. Victory Bell only has 11 showings with Executor. It's at 40% win rate. That's okay, but it's also a super low amount to see any kind of real data from it. Pidgeot with Victory Bell has 2 showings, went 0-3 drop. That's really funny, really sad. And then you have 1 showing with the 2-1. This must be a very small tournament to only have 1 showing and only go 2-1. So we're going to keep that not really in mind. Plus, you're all the way down to 354 here in general. Flip side, we look at Pidgeot. Pidgeot 19. Pidgeot, interestingly enough, 107 showings, 44% win rate. Pidgeot with Mew is doing okay, and Drodigan doing also okay, 49 and 43%. Overall, it's looking about balanced around 46%, 45%. So data-wise, technically, it's actually this that's doing better. I think having Erica inherently makes this deck a little bit better for the Victory Bell because they're both stage 2s, but they're so close 50-50. Depends on what day you ask me. I can flip-flop between which one's better. At the end of the day, though, they're both C tier. They're not really anything crazy. Gengar. I think this is a bad deck, and it's a bad card, frankly. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the non-EX version of Gengar is better than the EX version. EX version takes 3 energy, is a stage 2 evolution, and only does 100 damage. The juice is not worth the squeeze. You turn around and say, oh, but its ability to turn off supporter cards is what makes it good. I will tell you, you're wrong, because by the time you get a stage 2 out, they've already played all their supporters that matter. They've played Leaf to kind of back out of stuff, or like bring other things. Like, let's say they're playing Leaf to take out their Druddigan to bring in the card that they've been building up in the back line to start attacking your stuff. Or they've used Professor's Research to draw into their evolutions to get going with their deck while you're trying to find yours. Even with the inclusion of Slab, I think helped a lot when it comes to Alakazam, because I think the support around Alakazam, even though they're both psychic, is just a bit better and works better in that shell. And building up to Alakazam, I think is just a better card overall than building up to Gengar. It's just not very good. I'm sorry to say, I love Gengar, one of the coolest Pokemon there is. Just doesn't really do it for me. That said, Primeape and Mankey, I think, is a A-tier deck. I think it just has that speed behind it. And of course, you see it paired with Aerodactyl a lot. So I think it has to be an A-tier deck. But even the ones that are not leaning into Aerodactyl and more so leaning onto just Marshadow, Hitmonlee, and the Farfetch kind of game plan to go a bit more leaner and lower to the ground are really good as well. So we see Primeape Mew 54.76%, Primeape Marshadow doing 52% win rate. Look, they're doing pretty well on their own right, even outside of Aerodactyl. Meanwhile, the Aerodactyl versions are doing incredibly well with 62% win rate there. We see another 53% win rate and then a 59% win rate. So the numbers don't lie, and it has a couple of wins underneath its belt as well, either with Aerodactyl or without it, at least in larger scale tournaments. Good deck. Very good on ladder as well. Let's do Arcanine and Charizard as a bunch here. They're both A tier. They're still very good. Being able to build them up is very strong. I think the one with them together is still the best version of the deck rather than being separated. We've seen the ones with Arcanine leveraging that one Mew to kind of help with other certain matchups to help push it out of the meta. Charizard's tried the similar idea as well. But I still think overall they are very good decks. Still A-tier decks, still super strong. Charizard's still the only thing in the game that can one-shot anything at the moment. And you can see it posting pretty solid win rates as well. 51% here, 52% here, and then 48% here. I think the Charizard one by itself is the weakest of the bunch, but the one with them together I think is the strongest. You should be doing it that way. But either way, you'll have a lot of fun with these decks, and you should find some decent success. Arbok, we're going to say it's a C-tier deck. It's okay. It didn't really gain much in terms of like support. It has the flute, I guess, and it can do some funny things with these new cards here with Victory Bell and Pidgeot, but overall, it's still the kind of same card. It's not super crazy. Pikachu, it's the third and I think final S-tier deck. Now, Raichu's right here. We'll talk about Raichu in a second, but Pikachu, when referring to Pikachu, I'm talking about this kind of deck. where is it? Pikachu with a Zapdos, the Zebstrika lineup, the new Electabuzz in there, and Dendene are in there as well. And that's really the more leaner, meaner, low to the ground, fast Pikachu we've come to know and love. Zebstrika being able to hit stuff on the bench is a great flex option, but Electabuzz being able to do the same thing now as an extra card to help support that idea without actually attacking the front line, while still having access to a Zapdos you can build on the back line as well on occasion. And Dendene to be a bit more consistent, whatever the Electric Pyukumuku is called, is pretty nice. I think it's a very good deck. It matches up nice against Gyarados in the early game, and it does okay against Mewtwo as well, but it's just a great rock, paper, scissors in there. That being said, Raichu, I think, is just an A tier. I think the Raichu version is just not as good as this low to the ground version. Leaning on Lieutenant Surge and needing to kind of flip-flop around your energy management and put it all into one thing for one-shots, and still having the ability to go fast sometimes with the Pikachu in general is fine. Runs more than Dende's, has to run the normal Pikachu, which I think is just not very good. Still a very good deck, don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's anything close to the Pikachu you see on the side here. Let's go ahead and just do... Venusaur is just kind of like MIA. We never see it. I think it has the chance to be C tier at least because of Erica. I don't think you want to run Superior with it. Too many things going on. I think the Butterfree one, if you're going to run another Stage 2, is better because at least Caterpie has the Find a Friend ability to just find you more grass types. That being said, though, we don't really see Venusaur ever anymore, so Steel type. Blastoise, I'm going to reluctantly put it in C tier. The reason for that is this was an event yesterday. Gustavo here won the entire event with a Blastoise deck running a single Druddigon, a couple Articunos in the front line, and this was like a 200-person, 250-person event. I don't think this deck is incredibly good. I think, again, Gyarados is just a better version of what this deck wants to do, because you're going for 160 damage when you have 5 total energy on it, or you can do 140 damage with 4 energy on a stage 1 versus a stage 2. I actually almost want to put it in D tier, my heart tells me, but maybe Druddigon gives it enough of a chance of a wall and enough of a backup plan with Articuno, Misty stuff anyway to make it palatable in C tier. So I guess I'll leave it there. It did win an event, but I do lean heavily on the idea that Gustavo just pilots this in a great way and people weren't expecting it, so they might have made some questionable decisions, or they just ran super hot, and that happens sometimes as well. Wigglytuff. Same idea, Steel type. Don't really see it much anymore. I think it's a D tier overall, personally. It just doesn't do quite enough. Kind of similar to Gengar. It's just a low impact attack. It's only 80 attack. And it just doesn't do enough. Yeah, the sleep is fine. If you don't get your flips to roll your way, you're kind of SOL, and that's especially true with the Jigglypuff leading up to it. You don't have a nice curve either. You go Jigglypuff, make someone sleep, and then if you want to evolve, it's not a good idea because you have to go up to 3 energy, so you have to kind of like go for another hit with Jigglypuff again, hope your sleep stays around a second time, or you have to build them up in the back line. I don't know. I just don't think it's good. But we are going to finish with Blaine. We're going to put it probably right here. Blaine is a very good deck. It's super solid. Has a few, like, I think it might have 1 win under its belt in the last, like, couple weeks. But for the most part, we see it get top 32 finishes. Not a whole lot of wins, though, but that makes sense because, like any aggressive deck, it's very good at hitting things hard and fast in the early game. But once you allow those other decks like Gyarados and stuff like that to stick around longer than what your game plan takes into consideration for, you can't keep up with their mid to late game now. So that's the list. S tier is Gyarados with Greninja in particular, Mewtwo, and then low to the ground, super aggressive Pikachu. What do you guys think? Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.